All right, this is tuning part 4, I believe. And in this video, we're going to talk about snare drum tuning. So, basically, no matter what you do with the top head, for me, the bottom head always stays the same. So, let me take this drum off the stand. And basically, it's just like any other drum. You want to go around and try to make sure all the lug points are the same pitch, so the drum's within tune. So the drum is in tune with itself. Worth mentioning on these bottom snare side heads, these heads are like crazy thin, so it can be really difficult to hear the pitch. A lot of times, I just kind of go by feel. So I'll get all the tension rods finger tight, all balanced, and then really be diligent with how much I'm cranking each one up as I seat the drum head and get it up to pitch. Just trying to make sure I do the same amount on every lug, especially with the snare side head, because it can be hard to hear pitch. But here's a little trick. So like, if you want to tap around and be able to actually hear pitch, it can be hard to do with the snares on there, making everything buzz. So what you can do is just make sure you throw your snares off here on your throw off, and then take a drumstick and put it underneath, and then you just kind of wedge it up like that. Now the snares aren't in the way, and you could take your drum key and go around and tap. So this one's obviously low. Now, this might be low on purpose. Sometimes I detune this lug and this lug and this lug and this lug. Basically the two adjacent lugs to the snares. Sometimes I will detune those a bit. Maybe like a half turn or a quarter turn. Maybe even more, depending. Because sometimes, not always, but sometimes that will help these snares not buzz as much, like from sympathetic vibrations, like when I go and I hit my rack tom and it makes the snares go bzzz, like all crazy. And, I don't want to change the tuning of my rack tom, because a lot of times you can eliminate that by changing the tuning on your rack tom. But what if you don't want to change the tuning on your rack tom? Well, it helps to sometimes detune those two adjacent lugs here. And also, I don't have it on this drum, but sometimes I'll take just a little piece of masking tape, the width or maybe slightly wider than the width of the snares, and just tape it to the head, right in the middle, right in the center of the drum, underneath the snares. And that will make the snares not buzz as so much from those things. Now, in a live situation, this doesn't matter quite as much, but in a recording situation where you got close mics all over the place, you kind of want to minimize the amount that those snares are rattling from sympathetic vibrations from either a tom-tom or a kick drum. Those are typical places. So those are little tips. Now, as far as the tension on the bottom head, basically we're going for really, 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 really tight. Think tabletop tight. Now, I mean, you don't want to go crazy, but I mean, I don't know if you can see that with the camera, but I'm pressing on this head pretty hard, not crazy hard, because I don't want to dent it because it's so thin. But I mean, this is cranked up. Like, I went around a bunch of times and it's really, really tight. I never worry about tuning to a specific pitch on the bottom of the snare drum. The only thing I'm concerned about is what I just mentioned, and getting that really, really tight. And over time it will kind of loosen up, and I just every few weeks I'll flip the drum over and tweak it up just a little bit more. The reason I do this, and most drummers I know do this, is because you get the cleanest sound out of the drum. It doesn't matter where the top head is. I always keep that really tight, and you get really good snare response, and you just get a nice, clean, crispy, punchy snare drum sound when that head is just super tight. Okay, so that's what I recommend. So, okay, let's flip this drum over and talk about options for the batter or the top side of the drum. Okay, so right now, this drum, the top head, is really at kind of a medium tuning. It's not super low or loose, and it's not cranked up and tight and high pitched. It's right in the middle of the range. Now, worth mentioning, this is a 14-inch snare drum, so what I'll do is I'll turn the snares off and I'll just tap on this for a second so you can hear the pitch. I didn't use a tuner to grab a pitch right now, but if you want to compare it to your snare drum, you can just listen for the pitch and know that if it's, you know, in the ballpark as being the same as this, then you're kind of in that middle range. You can also tell from kind of pressing on it, like I'm pressing pretty hard, but it does give a little bit. It's certainly not tabletop tight, and it's not super spongy, right? It's right in the middle of the range there. So listen to the pitch here. Okay, and I'll turn my snares back on. Now, so like middle of the range snare, this is sort of like your all-purpose setting for the snare drum. It works good for basically anything. It's not specific. It doesn't do one thing very well, but it will function in pop and rock and R&B and jazz and blues and all kinds of stuff. It works with a rim shot. It works without a rim shot. Basically, like if I'm going into like do a gig and we're covering a whole bunch of different styles of music, there's never time really to mess with tuning between songs or muffling between songs. So usually I'm going in with like a medium tension drum like this because I know it'll work okay for all the songs. So that's sort of the deal with the medium tension. So like I said, it can work in a rock thing. It can work in a jazz thing. It could work in a blues thing, like a shuffle. I can play with the rim shot and maybe a little out towards the edge to get a little higher pitched crack for like a funk thing. Right? So it can kind of do everything okay. So, you know, that's your general purpose setting for the snare drum. Now, I want to look at a couple other settings for your snare drum tuning that are really cool and work awesome for certain styles and in certain situations. So the first one, let's look at like cranking this thing up so it's really high and really tight, and this will work really nice in like in a funk setting or like a hip hop thing, or any kind of modern, like a modern pop thing where you just like, you're playing rim shots all the time and you just want that super high pitched crack, ear piercing, like cutting through the mix thing. Okay, so I'm just gonna crank up this drum and then we'll see what it sounds like. Okay. Pretty cranked. I mean, I did like a full turn on every single lug. This head is really tight. So let's see what it sounds like. Alright, pretty cool, right? For those certain styles, So I did like a funky thing first, and then a hip-hop-ish thing second, and then like a pop rock dance beat third. And it just sounds awesome for all those things. That was all rim shot on all of these. Like, if I'm going to crank a drum up like that, it's really for those specific purposes. And I'm usually not playing it in the middle without a rim shot. It doesn't feel good to me. It feels really stiff. And I'm really just looking for that crack if I'm going for this tuning. You'll also notice the drum dries out a lot when you tune it up high, so it doesn't have as much ring as it did in that medium tuning range. Now, we can fix ring with muffling, which I'll talk about in a second, but you can also fix it by tuning higher if you want a higher tuning anyways. All right, so now let's look at a third option for your drum, which is tuning it super low and adding a fair amount of muffling to it so we get this low, fat, deep snare drum sound. So this is classic of like some old school R&B or soul music, or even a lot of rock music. A lot of times we're going for that low, fat, dry thing. And in this setting, for me, it's almost always without a rim shot. The rim shots usually don't sound that great. So anyways, let me tune this way down and add some muffling, and we'll see what it sounds like. Alright, so now we're like super low, right? Sounds pretty nasty with the snares on. Super ugly, right? Now, that's okay, because once we add a bunch of muffling, it'll take out that ugliness and we'll just have low and fat. But let's hear it without muffling first. So it's super low and fat. But it is very ugly. Sometimes I like that, but to get what I was really talking about, we're going to need to add muffling. So what I usually use is like this dampening gel. The classic brand is called Moon Gel, and it's blue. This is actually some clear gel made by a company called Slap Cats. It's all kind of the same stuff. So I'm going to use a big piece of that, and then I'm going to use another big piece of that. We'll throw that on there and see what that sounds like. Ooh, pretty nice. I think I want a little more though. So we'll grab like a medium piece and throw it over there. You can also use tape and like paper towels or toilet paper and like tape it up. That works well. This is easier and actually I think sounds a little better. Check this out. It's pretty nice. Now I think it's still a tiny bit ugly, and I think I could come up in pitch just a little bit, and that'll help clean it up a little bit. And it is very, very low. It could be a little higher. So let's bring it up just a little bit. I mean, these tension rods were almost totally loose on there. It's about as low as you could go on a 14-inch drum. Alright, let's listen to this. See? It is a little higher in pitch, but I think it's still cool, and that cleaned it up a lot, right? So in context... So that's a really nice setting. You know, unfortunately, it's a little hard to get there sometimes. It takes a minute, and usually if I'm going to use that tuning, like I'll just keep another snare drum that's already set up that way, because it does take a minute to get there. So if you go back and listen to like a lot of Tom Petty songs, Stan Lynch on drums, or like some old Al Green, some funky soul stuff, Al Green with Al Jackson Jr. on drums, and that's like the exact same sound, and that's how they tuned and set up their snare drums to get that sound. And a lot of producers and engineers and stuff, they love that sound. It records really well, and it sits in the mix really nice. So it's like those three options. You got your middle of the road. You could throw some muffling on that middle of the road, or any of these, however you want, or no muffling. That's all your choice. But yeah, the middle of the road thing, the high cranked cracking thing, and then the low super muffled fat thing. And those are like really the three settings. Obviously, you got infinite possibilities in between all those. And you can do all this out of one drum. A 14-inch works. I tend to prefer 13-inch snare drums. And a 13 will do all this as well. A 13 will do the high cracking thing a little bit better. The 14 will do the low fat thing a little bit better. When you get into 12-inch snare drums, it's a little harder to do this, and certainly smaller snare drums, 10s or whatever, they basically don't do any of this. They do one thing. So, cool. Before I forget, I should also talk about the snare tension here. And for me to talk about that, let me put this back into our middle-of-the-road medium tuning range. Alright, close enough? Yeah, back in that middle range, it's actually pretty much in tune. I got lucky there. Okay, so snare tension. So basically, this is an important consideration. So every snare drum will have what we call the strainer or the throw off. So this is where you can throw off that lever to turn the snares off and get a tom-tom sound, or turn them on and get a snare drum sound. So this knob right here, basically all strainers or throw-offs are the same. They will all have a knob here that is adjustable, and if you turn it clockwise, it will make the snares tighter against the bottom head, and if you turn it counterclockwise, it makes them looser against the bottom head. So tighter, it's a crispier, drier sound. Looser, it's going to be more rattly and more snarey sounding. So this adjustment is really crucial to your overall snare sound. So usually I have it like somewhere in the middle. So if you go too tight, it kind of chokes out the drum, and the drum sounds very choked. It doesn't have enough snare going on. It almost gets a little bit of tom-tom quality to it. It changes the way it feels too, and the air doesn't push against the bottom head quite as well, and it's a very choked kind of sound. And you know, I've never liked that, and I see a lot of drummers that do that, and I think it's just because they don't know. Okay, so if you go too loose, you get it super rattly and really buzzy, and pretty much I never want that unless I'm playing like some sloppy second line New Orleans style drum parts. Okay, so let me throw it back on the basket here, and I'll show you the difference between those three kind of settings. So right now it's right in the middle. It's kind of nice. It's usually where I keep it. So it's snary, but it's not choked, and it's not too rattly. Okay, now let me tighten it up a lot and choke out the drum, and you can hear what that sounds like. See, it sounds super choked, right? It has more of a tom-tom quality. There's not enough snare in the mix, and it feels weird to play it. and it to my ears it just doesn't sound all that great. So I pretty much never choke out my drum unless I want that specific sound, which is pretty much never. Now let me go looser and get it rattly, and we hear what that sounds like. Alright? So you can hear there's a lot of wash, a lot of buzz after I hit the drum. I could make it even a little more rattly. Right? So, you know, obviously for a lot of like backbeat, groove oriented, you know, pop stuff or whatever, that's just gonna sound really dumb every time you hit the snare drum. So, you know, the only time I want that, like I said, is if I'm doing like a New Orleans thing. In which case, that sounds really great and feels really great. That will be an adjustment that I make if I'm on a gig or whatever, and I know there's like a New Orleans tune coming up. I'll reach down and loosen that up real quick if I remember, and it does make it makes it better. So, anyways, I think that's it for snare drum tuning. Those are the basics, and cool. See you next time.